Hey, what's up everybody? It's TheHyphenate here. Today we're going to talk about how to set up and record a two-person podcast. Now there are a lot of different styles and there's a lot of different equipment that you can use to get the same result. But today we're going to talk about my personal favorite choice and something that's not only professional, but that works on a budget. Today's podcast setup for two hosts is going to run less than $300 US. Towards the end of the video, after I go over the budget-friendly setup, then I'll also go over a more expensive setup for those who want to upgrade their podcast equipment or want something a little bit more on the radio broadcast style setup. But first, let's talk about how to set this up with under $300. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different ways to set up podcasts. Some people use laptops, some people use desktop computers. Some people use dynamic microphones, some use condenser microphones with mic pre's and audio interfaces. Personally, I do have all the equipment for every single one of those methods, but I actually have a different way that I go about it that I think is a lot faster, cheaper, and also more portable. And all you really need are 6 items: a digital audio recorder, an SD memory card to record audio into, 2 microphones, and 2 XLR cables. So let's break down each individual item. For the digital audio recorder, my personal choice is the Zoom H4n Pro. But whatever recorder you use, just make sure that it accepts 2 XLR inputs. The H4n Pro retails for only $220. Next, you'll need an SD memory card for your recorder. You don't need anything crazy fast or super expensive. A UHS 1 Class 10 memory card with 80 megabytes per second is more than enough for what you need to record high quality WAV files. And those memory cards retail for only about $7 if you're getting a 32 gigabyte. Next, you'll need 2 microphones, one for each guest, and I recommend a cardioid dynamic microphone. Now, the great thing about these is that they don't require phantom power, so you just plug them in and they work. Also, they have a cardioid polar pattern. I'm not gonna get into full scientific breakdown of how that works, but essentially it picks up audio mostly from the front of the microphone and rejects a lot from the sound and even more from behind. Now that's really great because you don't want to hear a lot of background noise when you're having speakers, and you don't want the other person speaking to bleed into one microphone. So by having both of these, they both reject sound from outside and focus only on the subject that's in front of the microphone. The cardioid dynamic microphone that I recommend is the Behringer XM8500. It retails for less than $20, but it works fantastically. They're cheap, they have a pretty great sound, and they last a long time. XLR mic cables can range in price, but honestly, you can get a good set for about $32. And I would recommend getting a 15-foot cable for each person because you want to be able to make sure that they're not constricted by a shorter cable. You want to be able to allow them to move around. That way, nothing gets tugged on or the recorder doesn't get pulled. And that's pretty much it. That's all you really need for a 2-person podcast setup for recording. Now, you're still gonna need a computer to drag and drop the files into and edit and finalize as a finished audio file. But as far as the podcast setup goes alone, all you're gonna need is the recorder, memory card, 2 mics, and the 2 cables. And that'll run you about $297. Now, yes, that is not including tax. So you're gonna pay, maybe about $30 more, a little less maybe. But for the core price, less than $300, and it sounds great. Now, there are definitely other things that you can add to make it even better, whether it's different microphones or mic boom arms that hold the mics in place so you don't have to hold the microphone. But for this setup alone, this is how I started doing my podcast a few years ago. And honestly, it worked great. Let me show you guys a little clip so you guys can see and hear what it sounded like.
I agree.
Yeah.
Or you agree with me?
Yeah, we agree. So
you concur.
Yeah.
All right, so now let me go over a few pros and cons with this affordable budget setup that I mentioned. First and foremost, you're gonna be limited to only 2 people on the podcast, and that's primarily because of the recorder itself. The recorder only accepts 2 XLR inputs. Now, if you wanted to add more people, you would need to get a recorder that has more inputs, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's easily done. Another con is that with this setup, you have the mics being held by people, so they tend to move the mics a lot or even fiddle with the cables, and that can introduce some handling noise into the recording. So ideally, you want to make sure that you tell your guest or yourself even not to mess around with the mic too much and just try to keep it as still as possible so that you limit that amount of handling noise. Another con that's connected to that is that your arms can get a little tired of holding a microphone for a good portion of time. So what I would usually do when I was doing my podcast is every so often, every few minutes, I would actually switch hands when I wasn't talking. That way my arms stay rested and they don't get tired or don't start to cramp up. And honestly, those are pretty much the only cons. Though it seems like it's a little unprofessional or doesn't seem very high end, it actually sounds great. And so long as you edit your podcast, so long as you edit in the computer and you make it sound good, then people will think that you're actually in a broadcast studio. Now let's talk about the pros for this setup. First and foremost, it's tiny, lightweight, compact, very portable. So you can easily put it in a bag. You could take it to any location you really want to and set up a podcast. So you could either do it if you have it at a studio or if you want to take it to someone's house, pretty much wherever you want to go. That's all you need. Small, tiny bag, and you can be set up and ready to go within minutes. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this setup does get you a very professional sound, and let me tell you why. First and foremost, the H4n Pro is a professional audio recorder, and it works great. It has some amazing AD converters, mic pre's, and a very low noise floor. So you're getting a very clean sound from your analog recording. Another thing that I think really makes this sound even better is that the H4n Pro has a built-in compressor and limiter. I'm not gonna get into the full breakdown of how compressors and limiters work, but essentially what it does is it brings down some of the higher volume sounding stuff and it averages out slightly the sound from the lows and the highs. So it kind of makes your recording sound a lot more even. And I always make sure to have that compressor on when I'm recording a podcast. Another pro to the setup is using dynamic microphones with XLR cables, which actually create a better, more natural sound than USB microphones. So now that you guys know what you need and how great it works, now let me show you guys how to actually set it up for recording. So first and foremost, get your H4n Pro and make sure that it has fully charged AA batteries. Also make sure that you have your SD memory card inserted and that there is enough space to record an episode. Now that everything's connected, get your H4n and turn it on. Then you're going to go and choose your audio format. So you're going to go into the menu and go into record, and then from there, record format. Now, if you want the highest quality, then you would choose Wave 96 kilohertz 24-bit. Now, personally, I don't think you need to go that high. I think even at 48 kilohertz 24-bit is more than enough to make it sound great. And 48 kilohertz is pretty much the audio you'll use when doing professional video. After that, let's add the compressor. So you're gonna go into input in the menu, and then from there, you'll see different options, and you'll see comp/limit. Click on that, and then you'll see two options. You'll see mic and you'll see input. Mic is for the top built-in microphones, and then input are for the inputs at the bottom, the XLR input. So go ahead and select on input, and the one that I use is comp2 vocal. As you're adjusting the input level for each mic, make sure that the people speaking, including yourself, you're doing a test speaking at a normal volume and then speak a little bit more loudly, because there are times when we get a little bit more excited about something that we're speaking about, and so our volume increases. Now you wanna make sure that your recording is not being maxed out underneath that. So you wanna make sure that have them speak loudly and adjust the mic input a little lower so that way you have some headroom for when they do speak loudly, it won't clip. After everything's set up, press the record button one more time and the record light around the button will stay solid red, letting you know that it's recording, and you'll see the timer start off. And then when you're done, you just press stop on the recorder. Now, one thing to note on the H4n Pro, you do have two different options to record your audio inputs. You can either record it as a stereo audio file where one mic input is the left audio and the other is the right audio, or you can have it recorded to two separate mono audio files. So that way each individual person has their own audio file. And that's how simple it is to do a podcast for under $300. So now that you guys know how to set up a podcast for under $300 US, now let's talk about a little bit more of an expensive setup, having a little bit higher quality and a little bit fancier items. If you guys are looking to have more than two people on a podcast, then I recommend using the Zoom H6n digital audio recorder. That allows 4 XLR inputs. It does have a few more features than the H4n Pro. The H6n retails for $400 US. Now for microphones, if you want very professional radio broadcast quality, then the 2 mics that are industry standards are the Shure SM7B or the EV-RE20. Either one of those mics sell for $400 per mic. Next, you'll want some boom arms that clamp onto a table that you can mount your microphone onto. And the boom arms that I recommend are the Rode PSA-1 Studio Boom Arm. It's heavy duty and it works great, and it retails for about $100 each arm. Then you'll also need shock mounts that connect to the boom arm. These shock mounts allow you to put the microphone in it, and they hold the mic in place, allowing it to absorb shock. So that way, if you hit the boom by accident or any other handling noise on the desk, it actually absorbs it and it doesn't get into the microphone or the recording. Shock mounts for each mic run about $100 each. Now, if you wanted to get higher end mic cables, the brand that I recommend is Mogami, and you'll spend about $55 for a 15-foot mic cable. So in total, this more expensive, higher quality setup runs about $1,700 US. Definitely a lot more than the budget friendly, but most people will not notice a huge difference in the audio recording. So honestly, I think this $300 setup that I mentioned in the video works great, and it's something I highly recommend. Again, if you're interested in getting any of the items that I mentioned, either for the budget friendly or the more expensive setup, I do have links in the description. It doesn't change the price that you get it at, but it does help this channel. Please make sure to drop a like on the video, drop a comment below if you have any questions, and please make sure to subscribe. I have a lot more videos coming soon, including how to actually edit your podcast on a computer to actually finalize a professional sounding finished product. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate the support. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.